Let me give a brief review, though, to wrap this up today. I did finish up the second book in the Jedi Academy trilogy, Dark Apprentice. Now, if you've been around for a while, you heard me talk about the first book, Jedi Search. And, as I said about that, I said, it was fun hanging out with the characters, but it was very obviously that this was a very amateur writer at the time. Now, let me be very clear. I am not crapping on Kevin J. Anderson because he's written some amazing things since then. I love a lot of the things he's written. I guess this was just something really early on in his career. Either that or maybe it was just he was too much of a fan of the material, and it does come off as sort of sounding fan fiction-ish. It's not as greatly, it's not very well paced. There are these elaborate scenes that really have nothing to do with the whole. And, book 2 still feels like that. It's not any better written, although there are times that it really does carry you along and you are engaged and the pacing's great. But it's just, it's hit or miss or whatever. And again, I imagine he was writing these all pretty closely together back in the day. But I don't want to just crap on Kevin J. Anderson. I'll probably say this again when I talk about the third one, because I love, like, for example, his Tales of the Jedi comics. Oh man, I loved them. I had the omnibus, and I think it was him and Tom Veitch. I think it starts out with Kevin J. Anderson, then it goes to some Veitch stories, and I think it goes back to Kevin J. Anderson. And you can tell when it moves author, because the Tom Veitch stuff it's interesting stuff, it's interesting lore, but it's just not as fun to follow. It's still fun. You really delve and care about the characters, and it's fleshed out, and it's a fun story. So Kevin J. Anderson's done some great stuff. I actually also have, I wonder if I should, here, is this it? Let me see. No, this isn't my copy. His Enemies and Allies from Batman, Superman, Enemies and Allies. This isn't it, but I actually have, he was selling off some stuff that he just had around his office, I guess, at some point. And I have his advanced author review copy of Enemies and Allies that he signed, and I ordered that. And I was like, that's so cool, So just because I'm saying poor writing in this does not mean, Kevin J. Anderson. I actually really like him as a writer. But, the writing is just not great here. In Dark Apprentice, there's a lot more things that I think, that shouldn't be there. No, I don't really like that that's there. However, like, for example, there's this whole, like, back and forth throughout this book where Han and Lando keep replaying Sabacc for the Falcon. And, like, Han loses the Falcon to him again. And then they play it again, this and that. And that's just, like, that's too... get where he's going with it. It's kind of cool how it ends up, but it's like, you just don't do that. You don't just take things that were really cool from the past and just say, hey, let's do that again. It's like, no, so there's some things like that. The Dark Apprentice himself has this little confrontation with Master Luke Skywalker of the Academy at that point, which I don't like. I don't like that way it's handled. I get that you need to, this is the second book, and I'm sure he was doing sort of an Empire Strikes Back thing in which we need to end on sort of a win for the villains or whatever at this point and whatnot. But I don't like the way it was handled. It's like, that just wouldn't, no, that's not how that should be. But it's really cool having read Tales of the Jedi first and all of the Exar Kun and the Masasi and the lore of Yavin 4. Having read that first, when that's something that he went back and fleshed out after he wrote, Jedi Academy, because Luke sets up the Academy on Yavin 4, and you got to deal with the Force Ghost of Exar Kun and so forth. So it's really cool to see all that, play out here, further in the chronology, even if it was written first. I would love one day for Kevin J. Anderson now, being such an experienced writer now, to go back and just, like, rewrite this. Hey, that could never happen, rights and stuff like that. But I think that would be cool. But I'm still, it just ends on a cliffhanger and whatnot. The third book in the trilogy is what I'm going to read next. Champions of the Force, I think it's called. So I'll get through it. I'm just showing one book for all of them because I have the Sci-Fi Book Club's edition, which is all three books in one, which is a really great hardcover edition. So that's where I'm getting through them. But I just wanted to mention or say a few words about Dark Apprentice, because I did say a lot about Jedi Academy. It's there are a lot of fun things in it. Mara Jade finally shows up, which is great, but I don't really like the way Lando's handled. Han Solo, I don't really get what his deal is in this book. Like, what's he so angry about all the time? Like, what's his deal? I don't understand that, especially because he was written quite well in the first book. He was, one of the main heroes, and you were really following and rooting for him and stuff. I also really don't like the way they handled Jason and Jana, the twins. They're just epic little brats. They're 2 years old at this point, which I get it. Okay, two toddlers, terrible twos, but not every toddler is a holy terror. And these kids, like, we never see a sweet moment with them. They're just always epic brats. Like, they get lost at one point, and I'm like, I hope you do get eaten by the ogre. I don't care about you. I really don't care. And I know those characters aren't like that in the rest of the EU. I know they go on to be central, pivotal characters and so forth. But yeah, I didn't like the way they're handled either. Um, Other than that, I do like the general lore, the way it's progressing and whatnot. Akbar is fleshed out a bit. It's need to see some more of his backstory and whatnot. So I don't know. I'm trying to be balanced because I don't utterly loathe. I don't. It's not very well written, but it's not a book that I would kick aside and say, "Never read this. This is utter trash from top to bottom," because it's a pivotal part of the EU chronology. It's when Luke sets up his academy, and if you're like me and you want to follow the EU timeline and read all of the story and get the whole story of it, this is books you have to go through. But they're just not as well written as some of the others, and that's okay. Not every writer has to write gold, but I think something like this could probably only happen at the beginning of the EU anyway. I will say this for Dark Apprentice, and I said this for Jedi Search too. Kevin J. Anderson really is to be applauded. He deserves credit for really taking seriously the fact that this is all a shared universe. I mean, you got characters from Courtship of Princess Leia. You got some of the Dathomir witches. One of Melisse is coming to join the academy. There's Mara Jade. There's characters and references to what happened at the Truce of Bakura. Of course, the Thrawn trilogy. Dark Empire and all this kind of stuff. So, it really does. Even definitely at this point in the writing of the EU, Kevin J. Anderson was the first one to really take that into account and really reference things that have been happening and make it feel like you're in a big shared universe. And I think his book's probably one of the ones that does that more than any others, period. But I don't know. I'm still going through a lot of the EU anyway. So that's my thoughts on that. Just wanted to give some brief thoughts on it as I move into Champions of the Force, and we'll see how it all turns out and keep going ahead. Again, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to play the Jedi Academy games, which are like the last two in the Dark Forces series. And I just wanted to have read the Jedi Academy books before then, me being the compulsive story and order kind of person.